Let me tell you something about getting old that nobody puts in the pamphlets. It is not the stiff knees in the morning. It is not the reading glasses you leave beside every chair like little surrender flags. It is not even the doctor appointments, where men half your age look at you like a machine they are slowly losing confidence in. No. The thing nobody warns you about is your own children. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Get comfortable. Pour yourself something warm. And remember, the people in these stories usually had every chance to behave decently. They chose otherwise. My name is Harold Whitaker. Harry, to the few people who still call me with affection and not obligation. I am 68 years old. I spent 42 of those years building something out of mud, sweat, diesel fumes, unpaid invoices, and stubbornness. Whitaker and Sun Grounds maintenance began with one second-hand Ford Transit van, 2 lawn mowers, and 1,200 pounds I had saved in an old biscuit tin while my wife thought I was putting money away for a holiday. By the time I turned 58, we had 12 vans, 29 employees, and contracts with office parks, hotels, schools, and half the private estates outside Bath. Whitaker and Son. That was the name. Not because there was a son in the business at the beginning. There wasn't. My boy Graham was still in school when I painted those words on the side of the van. I named it that because I believed one day he would stand beside me. That was my first mistake. Now picture my house. A 4-bedroom brick home on Rowan Close, just outside Bath. Nothing grand, nothing with gates or fountains, just a solid house with a slate roof, a narrow front garden, and a back lawn I kept sharper than most men keep their promises. I bought it in 1989 with my wife, Elaine. She loved that house. She said it had good bones. After she died, I stayed there because leaving felt like a second funeral. Elaine passed when Graham was 14, ovarian cancer. Quick in the way cruel things can be quick. One year she was arguing with me about repainting the kitchen cabinets. The next year, I was standing in a cemetery with my son's hand gripping mine so hard I thought he might break my fingers. After that, it was just the two of us. Toast for dinner. School uniforms washed too late. Birthday cakes from the supermarket with candles pushed in at odd angles. I did my best. I will not pretend my best was always enough. But I gave Graham everything I had. And I mean that in the most literal way a man can mean it, which, as you will understand soon enough, was the beginning of the problem. 3 years ago, Graham and his wife Marissa moved in with me. I invited them. I want to be honest about that. I had suffered what the doctor called a minor cardiac incident. I dislike that phrase. It sounds like something that happens to a kettle. But there I was, lying in Royal United Hospital, listening to a consultant tell me to reduce stress and avoid overexertion. Graham came to see me with flowers, not from a petrol station, proper flowers, wrapped in brown paper, the sort of flowers a guilty person buys when they want the room to notice the effort. "Dad," he said, sitting beside the bed and taking my hand, "Marissa and I have been talking." That should have warned me. "We want to be there for you," he said. "You shouldn't be rattling around that house alone. We could move in, help with things, keep an eye on you." I looked at him. My son. My boy. "You're sure?" I asked. He squeezed my hand. "Dad, you're all I've got. Hook, line, and sinker. Now I need to tell you about Marissa. Marissa Whitaker, formerly Marissa Vale of Cheltenham, was the kind of woman who could smile while measuring the value of your curtains. She had a soft voice, expensive perfume, and the gift of making an insult sound like concern. "Harry, are you sure you should be lifting that?" she would say. Or, "At your age, stairs can be tricky." At your age. I was 66 when she started saying it. 66. I had spent 4 decades hauling turf, stone, timber, soil, and men with worse work ethics than wheelbarrows. But somehow carrying a laundry basket had become a matter of national concern. I smiled, because I had been raised to keep peace in my own house. That was my second mistake. The first year was not terrible. I will give them that. Graham helped around the place, badly but with effort. Marissa cooked on Sundays. Nothing memorable, but no one was injured by it. And then there was Oliver, my grandson, 12 years old when they moved in, thin, quiet, with my nose and Elaine's serious gray eyes. Oliver was the one clean thing in that house. He would sit with me in the back garden after school while I trimmed roses or pretended to read the paper. We talked about cricket, history, his teachers, the strange cruelty of boys his age, and the even stranger courage required to remain gentle anyway. "You remember everything, Granddad," he once told me. "No," I said. "I remember what cost me." He thought about that for a long time. Then he nodded. That was Oliver, always listening beneath the words. By the second year, things changed. Not loudly. Loud betrayal is almost a mercy. You can see it coming. You can prepare. This was quieter. Graham began speaking about the business differently, not as something I built, as something I was keeping from him. He would lean in the kitchen doorway with a mug of coffee and say things like, "Dad, some of the old client relationships need refreshing," or, "The company could grow faster with a more modern structure," or, "You've earned the right to step back." Step back. That phrase. It sounds harmless until you realize the person saying it has already chosen where they intend to push you. I would look at him over my newspaper and say, "The company is doing fine." He would smile. Not angry. Not yet. Just patient in a way I did not like. Marissa was always nearby during these conversations. Never leading, never obvious. Just there, standing at the counter, stirring tea, wiping a surface that was already clean, like a person watching a trap close and admiring the workmanship. Then came the dinner. A wet Thursday evening in November. Rain tapping against the windows. The four of us around the table. Lamb stew, crusty bread, one of the better meals Marissa had made. Graham cleared his throat. I knew that sound. It was the sound of a man about to say something rehearsed. "Dad," he began, "Marissa and I have been thinking." There it was again. "You've worked hard your whole life. No one can deny that. But the company needs clearer leadership now. I think it's time we made the transition official." I put down my spoon. "What transition?" He looked at Marissa, just for half a second, but I saw it. "The business," he said. "Whitaker and Son. You could transfer control to me. Keep your name on it, obviously. I would never take that away. But I would handle operations, contracts, assets, the vans, the accounts, everything." Oliver stopped eating. Marissa looked down at her bowl. I folded my hands. "And what would I do?" Graham gave me a smile that had no warmth in it. "Rest." There are words that sound like kindness until they are spoken by someone who wants you gone. "I'll think about it," I said. I had already thought about it. The answer was no. That quiet, reasonable no was the beginning of the end. After that, the house cooled by degrees. Conversations shortened. Doors closed faster. Marissa stopped asking whether I wanted tea. Graham spent long evenings in my study, the study I had used for 30 years to pay invoices and keep client records. When I walked past, he would lower his voice or end calls with a smoothness that only made them more suspicious. I began to notice things. A file moved from one drawer to another. Bank letters opened before I saw them. A folder of old company contracts missing from the cabinet, then returned 3 days later in the wrong order. Graham asking too casually, "Still using Mr. Calder for your legal affairs?" Mr. Calder. Arthur Calder, my solicitor of 21 years. A dry, precise man with spectacles permanently halfway down his nose and the emotional range of an oak desk. He was also the most careful man I had ever known. "Why do you ask?" I said. Graham shrugged. "No reason. Just wondering if he was still around." "He is." "Good," Graham said. But he did not mean good. That was when I called Arthur. We met the following week in his office in Queen Square. I told him what I had seen: the opened mail, the shifted documents, the questions, Graham's sudden interest in control. Arthur listened without interrupting. Then he removed his glasses, polished them slowly, and said, "Harold, we should review everything." Everything meant my will, my shares, the property, the company, my pension accounts, my insurance policies, the house, all of it. For 6 weeks, Arthur and I worked quietly. We drafted new documents. We established a trust for Oliver. We discussed protective structures for the company and the house. We prepared to remove Graham and Marissa from positions they had assumed were already theirs. But preparation is not completion, and betrayal does not wait politely for paperwork. It was a Tuesday evening in late January, an ordinary day, the sort of day that has no right to become the day your life divides into before and after. Arthur had called earlier asking me to find a box of old business agreements. They were in the cellar, I thought, either the blue storage box or the brown one. I went down after dinner while Graham and Marissa were in the sitting room. At least I thought they were. I opened the cellar door, one hand on the rail, one foot on the first step, then the second. I remember thinking the bulb needed changing. Then I felt it. 2 hands, flat against my back. Not a stumble, not an accident. A decision. I fell. The body has a strange mercy in moments like that. It does not let you keep every frame. It takes pieces away. It blurs the worst of it. But some things remain. The sound of wood, the hard arrival of concrete, the taste of blood in my mouth, my left arm at an angle my mind refused to understand, the light at the top of the stairs, a narrow rectangle, and in that light, Graham, my son, standing very still. Behind him, Marissa's voice. "Is it done?" Graham breathed hard. Maybe now he'll understand. Marissa laughed softly, not loudly. Not like a villain in a cheap film, just a small, pleased sound. "Leave him there," she said. "He'll learn." The door closed. The light disappeared. And I lay in the dark. Now listen carefully. Most men in that position would call for help. They would scream, beg, pray, curse. I did none of those things. I lay on that cold floor, with pain moving through me like weather, and I did the most Harold Whitaker thing I have ever done. I reached for my phone. It was in my shirt pocket. I kept it there because a doctor once told me, "At your age, Mr. Whitaker, you should always have a phone within reach." At your age. Well, credit where it's due. My right hand still worked. Barely. Enough. The screen was cracked from the fall. My thumb slipped twice. My vision kept narrowing, then widening, then narrowing again. I found the contact. Arthur Calder. It rang once. Twice. "Harold?" His voice was alert immediately. He knew. Some part of him had been waiting for this call. "Cellar," I said. The word came out broken. "What?" "Cellar. Hurt. Listen." Silence. Then his voice changed. "I'm listening. That is what you need in life. Not a person who panics, not a person who asks 10 questions while you are bleeding into concrete. A person who says, 'I'm listening.'" "The documents," I said. "Oliver's trust." "Harold, are you alone?" "Listen." A pause. "I am recording this call," Arthur said. "For clarity, speak slowly if you can. God bless that cold-blooded man." I gathered whatever voice I had left. "I, Harold James Whitaker, instruct my solicitor, Arthur Lionel Calder, to execute all prepared transfers into the Oliver Whitaker Trust immediately. House, company, accounts, shares, everything prepared. Graham Whitaker and Marissa Whitaker are to be removed as beneficiaries, completely." Arthur was silent for 1 second. Only one. "Understood," he said. "The rest," I said, "when I wake up." "Harold, who did this?" The darkness had already come to collect me. I do not remember answering. I woke in hospital. White ceiling, plastic rails, a machine making that steady little sound hospitals use to remind everyone that the body is a negotiator, not a promise. My left arm was in a cast. 3 ribs cracked, a concussion, stitches near my temple, bruising down one side of me that made me look like I had argued with a bus and lost on points. But I was alive. The first face I saw clearly was not Graham's, not Marissa's. It was Joyce Tremaine, my neighbor from across the road, 72 years old, retired librarian, widowed, small as a garden spade and twice as dangerous. "You frightened me, Harry," she said. Her eyes were red. "Joyce," I whispered. "How?" "I heard something," she said. "A crash. Then nothing. I came over. The front door was not locked properly. I found you." I closed my eyes. "You saved my life," she sniffed. "Well, someone had to. Your family seemed otherwise occupied." That was Joyce. Never waste a blade when a needle will do. Graham and Marissa arrived nearly 2 hours later. "I want you to see them as I saw them." Graham entered first, face arranged into concern. Marissa followed half a step behind, her usual position. Close enough to control the room, far enough to deny responsibility for whatever happened inside it. "Dad," Graham said, coming to my bedside. "God, Dad, we had no idea. We thought you'd gone out. We were searching everywhere." I said nothing. He touched my good hand. "We feel terrible. Don't we, Marissa?" "Absolutely terrible," she said. Her voice was soft. Her eyes were dry. I looked at her and heard again, "Leave him there." I smiled. Not warmly, not kindly. The smile of a man who had already made his call. "I'm sure you do," I said. Graham kept talking. "People do that when they are afraid of silence." He explained. He apologized. He invented a sequence of events in which I had somehow fallen, gone unnoticed, and been tragically misunderstood by 2 people who cared deeply. I let him perform. "I have always believed you learn more from people when they think they are convincing you." Then Graham noticed the chair in the corner. Arthur Calder sat there with a leather briefcase on his knees, still as furniture, watching. Graham stopped speaking. The room changed. It was remarkable. The air itself seemed to tighten. "Mr. Calder," Graham said. Arthur inclined his head. "Graham." "What are you doing here?" Arthur looked at me. I looked at Graham. "Arthur heard I had taken a tumble," I said. "He came to check on me." "At Harold's age," Arthur added. I nearly laughed, which would have been a mistake, because my ribs were not in a forgiving mood. Graham looked from Arthur to me, then back to Arthur. Behind him, Marissa had gone very still. "We should let your father rest," she said. For once, no sugar in her voice. Graham nodded too quickly. "Yes, of course. Dad, we'll come back tomorrow." "I'll be here," I said. They left. The door closed. Arthur stood, opened his briefcase, and placed a document on my tray table. "Are you capable of signing?" My arm throbbed. My head swam. My ribs objected to the entire concept of breathing. I took the pen. "Show me where." By the time Graham and Marissa left the hospital that day, the essential work was already done. Not all of it, but enough. The house on Rowan Close was transferred into a protected residential trust, with me holding lifetime occupancy rights. In plain English, I could live there until I died. Graham could not sell it. Marissa could not borrow against it. Neither of them could inherit it. The company was restructured. My controlling interest was moved into the Oliver Whitaker Trust, with Arthur serving as trustee until Oliver turned 25. Operational authority was placed under an interim management board. A buyer for part of the business had already been identified weeks earlier, quietly, by Arthur's network. The accounts were secured. The pension arrangements reviewed. The will rewritten. Graham and Marissa removed. Completely. Not punished. Removed. There is a difference. Punishment is emotional. Removal is structural. I spent 9 days in hospital. 9 days of bad tea, worse soup, and nurses who called me love in a tone that suggested I was both fragile and mildly inconvenient. Graham and Marissa visited 4 times. Each visit was better acted than the last. Graham brought fruit, then flowers, then a fleece blanket I had no use for. Marissa asked doctors careful questions about home care, recovery time, medication, mobility. Anyone watching would have thought them devoted. But Arthur was always present. If not in the room, then recently in the room. His briefcase on a chair, his coat over the back of the sofa, a sheaf of documents visible on the table. Graham noticed every time. He said nothing. That was when I knew he was frightened. A guilty man argues. A frightened man watches. Joyce visited every afternoon. She brought crossword puzzles and biscuits I was not supposed to eat. One day she looked up from her puzzle and said, "I never trusted that daughter-in-law of yours." "Only her?" Joyce adjusted her glasses. "I was being polite." "Joyce, you once told the vicar his sermon had the emotional range of damp cardboard." "It did," she said. I laughed. It hurt. I was glad. I returned home on a Friday. Graham and Marissa had prepared the sitting room like a convalescent stage set. Pillows, a blanket, tea, a little table within reach. Marissa hovered. Graham spoke in soft tones. I accepted it all. Why not? Let them have Friday. Let them have Saturday, too. Let them live for 2 more days inside the comfortable lie that they still had time. On Monday morning, Arthur arrived at 5 minutes to 10. Arthur was always 5 minutes early. Never 10. 10 was eager. 5 was professional. I was in the sitting room. Graham was in the kitchen. Marissa was upstairs. "Graham," I called. "Marissa, could you come in here? Arthur needs to go over a few things." I heard movement, then whispering, then Graham's voice, low. "Stay calm." They entered together. Marissa's smile was already in place. Then she saw Arthur's briefcase open on the coffee table. The smile remained, but the woman behind it stepped back. "Sit down," I said. They sat. Arthur began. No drama, no accusation, no raised voice. He simply explained. The house had been placed into trust. The company interest had been transferred. The accounts had been secured. The Oliver Whitaker Trust was the primary beneficiary. Graham and Marissa were no longer named beneficiaries under my estate. All instructions had been given by me, recorded on the evening of my injury, and confirmed by signature once I was medically fit to sign. Arthur placed copies of the documents on the table. Then he folded his hands. Silence. Not peaceful silence. Not confused silence. The silence of 2 people realizing that the door they had been pushing against did not open because it was no longer a door. Graham stared at the documents. Marissa stared at me. Then Graham said, "Dad, what is this? It seems clear enough. You can't do this. I already did. You were injured. Yes. You were confused. No. You were on medication. Not when I made the call," I said. Arthur added, "The call was recorded at 10:42 p.m. Mr. Whitaker's instructions were coherent, specific, and consistent with documents drafted over the preceding 6 weeks. His later signatures were witnessed. I anticipated a competency challenge." Graham looked at him. "You anticipated?" Arthur said nothing. That was answer enough. Graham turned back to me. "Dad." For a moment he looked younger. Not innocent. That was gone. But younger. Like the boy who once stood in the hallway after his mother's funeral and asked me whether people stopped loving you when they died. "Why?" he asked. And there it was. The first honest question he had asked me in years. I took my time. "Because I heard you," I said. His face changed. "When the cellar door closed, I heard what you said. I heard Marissa, too." Marissa's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you think you heard," she said. I heard enough. Graham looked down. I leaned forward as much as my ribs allowed. I built that company with my hands. I built this house with your mother. I raised you here. I gave you more chances than most men deserve. And when the time came for you to choose whether I was your father or an obstacle, you put your hands on my back. Marissa stood. The chair scraped sharply against the floor. For 1 second, I thought she would say something ugly enough to finally match her soul. She did not. She looked at the documents, then at Arthur, then at me, and she walked out. The front door closed a moment later. Graham did not move. After a long while, he said, "What about Oliver?" That was the first sign there might still be one unburned piece of him somewhere. "Oliver is protected," I said. "Better than you know. Better than he knows." Graham covered his face. I let him. Some silences are earned. They moved out within 13 days. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation in the driveway, no tearful reconciliation. Life is rarely kind enough to organize itself like television. There were boxes. There were black bin bags. There was Marissa directing removal men with clipped efficiency, as if leaving my house had been her idea all along. Graham avoided my eyes. Oliver did not. On the morning they left, he came to me in the back garden. He had his school bag over one shoulder. His face was pale and stiff in the way boys look when they are trying not to cry because someone has taught them crying costs too much. "Granddad," he said. "Yes, Ollie. I didn't know. I know. I mean it. I didn't know what they were doing. I believe you." He swallowed. "Can I still come here?" That question did more damage than the fall. I opened my good arm. He stepped into it. I held him carefully. "This garden has your name on it," I said. "Always did." He nodded against my shoulder. A 13-year-old boy should not have to learn that adults can be cowards. But children learn what we fail to protect them from. I still live on Rowan Close. Joyce still watches the street like a one-woman intelligence service. Arthur Calder still arrives 5 minutes early. Whitaker and Son is no longer quite what it was, but it is safe. The men who stayed with me kept their jobs. The contracts were honored. Oliver's trust holds what should have gone to the future all along. Graham calls sometimes. I answer sometimes. Not always. Forgiveness is not a door you owe someone because they finally knock. Marissa has not called once. I respect the honesty of that. Oliver visits most weekends. He sits with me in the garden where Elaine once planted lavender, and we talk about school, cricket, books, and the strange business of becoming a man without letting bitterness make all your decisions for you. One evening, not long ago, he asked me, "Do you regret it?" I knew what he meant. The trust, the removal, the cold precision of it. I looked at the lawn, at the house, at the life I had almost allowed other people to take from me because they shared my name. "The only thing I regret," I said, "is not calling Arthur sooner. So let me leave you with this. The people who try to bury you are usually counting on one thing, that you will be too tired to dig, too ashamed to speak, too loyal to defend yourself, too old, too soft, too sentimental, too frightened of being alone. They count on family meaning silence. They count on blood meaning permission. They count on you not having the right number saved in your phone. So ask yourself this. Who would answer if you called at 10:42 at night with 12 seconds of strength left? Who would stop asking questions and simply say, "I'm listening"? Because when the light goes out, when the door closes, when the cold floor is beneath you and the people upstairs think they have won, that is the only number that matters. My name is Harold Whitaker. I am 68 years old. I fell down a cellar staircase, and I got back up.